certain advanced topics in Ruby, and we'll get to the introduction of what is Ruby on Rails. So before going to Ruby on Rails, there are certain topics in Ruby which were left in the last session. First among them is loops. Loops, as you might be using it in other programming languages, loops are used to iterate over certain values. In this case, I have taken an example of array. An array, we want to loop and see what will be the output here. Okay, so first one is the for loop. So what is a for loop? A for loop iterates over a values and it prints the each value, or you can manipulate the each value that comes up. Now I have taken an array called fruits here, so which contains apple, mangoes and oranges. Now the syntax is for fruit in fruits. Okay, fruits is our array and fruit is the iterator. Iterator as in it will consider the each value in the array. Okay. So for fruits, put as fruit is fruit. Okay. We'll execute this and see so that you will understand it better. Fruits, which is nothing but some 3 values I'll add here. Say apples, mangoes and oranges. Okay, so this is my array. Now on this array I want to apply a loop. What do I write? I'll start with the for loop, a simple for loop. So for fruit, or whatever you want, any iterator, I, j, k is fine. So for fruit in fruits, fruits is the array that we declared. So in this I am writing a simple put a statement. Okay. So what did we get here? Fruit is apples, fruit is mangoes, fruits is oranges. Okay, so this is an example of very simple for loop. There are other ways also of looping through a array. We'll see the other method. Next one is using the each block. We have seen the for loop, now we'll see using each block. Now we have our fruits array, fruits dot each. Do again fruit, enter, put as fruit name is fruit. Okay, so again it printed fruit name is apples, fruit name is mangoes, fruit name is oranges. So here we have seen 2 ways of iterating through an array. One is using the for loop and another one is using the each block. Just note down these examples. Or false, whatever is the logic that you write, that gets implemented. I have taken an example of very simple if else block here. What did I do? I declared a as 10. If a is greater than 10, I am printing something. Else if a is double equal to 10, I am printing something else. If nothing is there, I am printing an else statement. So what should be the output here? It should be else if block that gets executed. Okay. So this is a very simple if else block. Another type of conditional statement is unless block. Unless block is present only in Ruby, where the negative condition gets executed. For example, if of false, this condition gets executed. So what is an unless block? Unless block, it executes if the given condition is false. It is opposite of if condition. Now I gave a equal to 10. So what did I write here? Unless a double equal to 10, put as yes is 10. Else put as no, try another number. In this case, else will get executed because first condition is true. True condition never gets executed here. False condition gets executed. So it goes to the else block. So the output will be no, try another number. This is a unless block. Switch conditions as in we write various cases and we see which one is true, that one gets executed. A switch statement is very much useful when you have multiple conditions. Instead of writing if else, if else, if else multiple times, you can use a simple switch case where you switch over a particular condition, and whenever the condition satisfies, you print the particular block or logic. Here what did I do? I took a variable a as 10. I am switching a here. So here syntax in Ruby is you should use the keyword case. Case A. When 5, I am printing a is 5. When 10, I am printing yes is 10. In another languages, you might have seen default case. When nothing gets executed and all of the conditions are false, it comes to the default case. In Ruby, we call this default case as simple else block. So else put as something. Here which one gets executed? When 10. Put as yes is 10. As I have declared a value as 10. When 10, this statement gets executed. Okay, this is simple. We have three conditional statement: if else block, unless block. Unless block is nothing but false condition gets executed. It is the opposite of if condition. Another is the switch statement where we are switching over a particular value. Are modules. So what are modules? Modules are also known as mixins. These are similar to classes, that is they hold a collection of methods, constants. It can have other modules and class definitions also. To define a module, we use the keyword module. Modules cannot be instantiated, that is an object cannot be created for a module. Module cannot be subclassed. So what is a module? A module is just like a class. It contains the methods, variables, and it can also contain other modules, other class definitions. It is just a collection of all these things. Just like how a class is defined using the class keyword, a module is defined using the module keyword. For a class, you can create an object. For a module, you cannot create an object. That is, it cannot be instantiated. And module cannot be subclassed. Subclassed as in it cannot inherit. There is no inheritance that can be applied to a module. Only classes can be subclassed, not modules. Now what is the purpose of modules? Modules, they act as namespace. That is, they let you create a method with same name in various modules. Modules can be used to share common functionality among various classes. Now you suppose you have some logic which is being used in different classes. So instead of writing the same logic in every class, what we can do is we can create a module. Inside the module you can write all the common logic, and that module you can use it in classes. So thus modules can be used to share common functionality. And they act as namespace. Namespace as in, suppose you have a method which you want to, a method name which you want to use in different classes or different modules. So you using module, what you can do is you can create a one method only in various modules. Okay, we'll see one example here. Now I have declared a module called mod1. Inside that I have defined a method called method1. How did I define? I used the keyword def mod1 dot method1. Inside that I wrote a test statement method1 in module1. This is our module. Now the same method called method 1. And what did I write here? Def mod2 dot method 1. This will create a namespace. Inside this I am writing a simple put as method 1 in mod 2. Now when I execute these two modules, if I call mod1 dot method 1, it will return method 1 in module 1. Method 1 in module 1. If I simply call mod1 dot method 1. And if I call mod2 dot method 1, it will return method 1 in module 2. Okay. Shall we execute this and see? A module using module keyword. My module name is mod1. Inside this I am writing a method called mod1 dot method 1. I am writing a simple puts as some method 1 in module 1 and def and module. Similarly, I am defining another method, another module. Say mod2. Okay. Inside this mod2 dot same method as method 1. Same name. So put as method 1 in module 2 and now I declare two modules. Now I'll call the method inside them. So mod1 dot method 1. It will return method 1 in module 1. Similarly, if I do mod2 dot method 1, it will return method 1 in module 2. So what we have observed here is you can see, you can define a method with the same name inside various modules and you can call them based on the module name. So this is nothing but creating a namespace. Okay. Let's see what's next. So to use a module in a class, extend or include keyword can be used. So we'll see what is the difference between extend and include. When extend is used, the method inside a module is called using the class name. And when include is used, the method inside a module is called using the objects of the class. Okay. We'll see one example. Here, what I have done is, I have created a module called lyrics. Inside that, I have written a method called def write underscore lyrics. Put as this method writes lyrics. I have ended it. Now we'll see what happens when you can include a module using the extend keyword. So I've created a class song. Inside that I've written extend lyrics. Now if I want to call the method write lyrics from the module, what do? I'll do it using the class name. Class name as in song. Song dot write lyrics will execute. Okay, when you use the extend keyword, you must call it using the class name. Similarly, I have done using the include keyword. I have created a class called song. I have written include lyrics, and inside that I have ended it. Now I want to use the method written inside the lyrics module. What do? I create an object. On that object, I'll call the method. Okay. We'll see an example. Module inside of a class. First, I'll create a module called lyrics. Inside that, I'll write a method called write lyrics. I'll write some simple put as this method writes lyrics. Okay. Now I'll create a class called song. Inside this, first we'll see how to do it using extend. So I'll write extend lyrics. Lyrics is our module name and end. Now I'll call using the class name. So what do we see here? Whenever you use the extend keyword, the methods inside the module are called using the class name. Class name dot the method name will invoke the method inside the module. Similarly, I'll use the include keyword. Include lyrics. And here first I have to create an object for the class. Object for the class is created using new keyword. So class name dot new will create an object for the class. Dot write lyrics. So here what we have observed? We have observed that whenever you use the include keyword, the method inside the module is called using the object of the class. So this is a simple example of module and how can a module be used inside a class using two ways. One is using extend keyword, one is using include keyword. Okay. So what is a self? Self is a special object in Ruby that always points to the current object. In Java, you must have come across a keyword called this. It is similar. So a self is a special object in Ruby that always points to the current object. I have given a very simple example here. We have a class song. Inside that I have written self.music and I have written a simple put statement defining a self method and end. So song.music returns defining a self method. What did we do? We used the keyword self inside a class to define a method. Now when we are invoking that method, we should replace the keyword self with the class name. Okay. So this is nothing but self. Self always points to the current object. If it is a class, if it is inside a class, it will be the class. If it is inside a method, it will be a method. Self always points to the current object that is being used. Okay. Now, class methods versus instance methods. So in Ruby, there are two kinds of methods. One is a class method and another one is the instance method. Now what are class method? Class methods are the methods defined on the keyword self, as we have seen in the previous examples. These methods are invoked using the class name. Instance methods are the methods that act on the instance of the class. An instance of the class is nothing but object. These methods are called or invoked using the object. Okay, a class method is something which is defined on the keyword self. These are invoked using the class name. Instance methods are something which are called using the object of the class. Very simple example here. Class song. I have defined a self keyword. So this should be a class method. So when invoking the method, what did I do? I replaced the self with the class name. So song.backgroundmusic will return I am a class method. So this is nothing but a class method example. A class method is defined using the keyword self. And while invoking the class method, we replace the self with the name of the class. Now next, we'll say instance method example. Instance method. Instance methods are methods which are invoked using the object of the class. Object of the class as in we create a new object using the new keyword. Now in this I have written a class called song. I have defined a method called background_music. I have written a very simple put statement. I am an instance method and end. Now, while invoking the method, what did I do? I made use of the new keyword. A new keyword will always create an object for the class. So, song.new dot background underscore music will execute the background underscore music method. Okay. Are the slides getting updated? Is there any delay? We'll see what is Ruby on Rails. Okay. So what is Ruby on Rails? Ruby on Rails is a web application framework built using Ruby language. It is a framework. Okay, a framework is nothing but a collection of various files, libraries, all together it will be in a single folder. So Ruby on Rails is a web application framework built using Ruby language. It is free open source framework. Free as in you can download it anytime. It doesn't require any license. Okay, you can download it for free and it is open source. Open source as in you can see the source code. What is actually the logic written inside the Rails application that you can see. That is nothing but open source. So Rails is a free and an open source framework. It is a full stack framework. What do you mean by full stack? Full stack as in it has both front end and back end. Okay, we'll talk about this, what is front end and what is back end. It is now what is the purpose of Rails? Rails is mostly used to build websites. Web applications are very easy to build using Ruby on Rails. So it is mostly used to build websites and it follows MVC architecture. Okay. Installing Rails, it is very much important to have Ruby and Ruby gems installed. In the last session, I have shared you a link on how to download Ruby. So, before installing Rails, before starting to code on Rails, it is very important to have Ruby. And when you download Ruby, you get Ruby gems and another library that gets installed. So, if you want, once you have Ruby and Ruby gems installed, to install Rails, we use the command called gem install Rails. This is the command which will install the Rails in your system. This you should type in the command prompt of your machine. Gem install Rails. Rails, after successful installation, you will see a steps happening inside of your command prompt. Once everything is successful, you can check the version of the Rails using the command Rails-v. Rails-v will tell you which version of the Rails is currently being installed. Currently, the latest version of Rails is 5.0. So to install the Rails, we use the command gem install Rails. Just note down these commands. Next. Now we have Rails installed in our application. Now we create our first project. Okay. To create a new Rails project, use the command Rails space new space whatever project name you want to give in your command prompt. Now here I have used a very simple Rails new sample underscore app. Whenever you want to create a new Rails project, in the command prompt, type the command Rails new sample underscore app. So this will create a new Rails project with folder name as sample underscore app. A new folder will be created with whatever name you give. And now by default few files and directories will be created inside of your Rails application. So to create a Rails command, we use the command Rails new project name, whatever name you wish to. Okay. Next. Principle. So what does this principle state? This principle states that every piece of information within a system must have a single unambiguous representation. So whatever logic, piece of information is nothing but certain logic, okay? Any logic within your application should always be written in one common way. One logic you can't write in 10 different ways, okay? So this principle states that every piece of information within a system must have a single unambiguous representation. One should not write a single piece of code again and again. This makes the code unmaintainable and more bugs arise. So dry principle, that is don't repeat yourself principle, it states that every piece of information or any logic that you write should not be written again and again. It should be reused as much as possible. That is, you should not repeat the same code again and again. So this is the first principle. Second principle of Rails is convention over configuration. Convention over configuration as in, this principle states that the developer must use the rules of the Rails framework and not use custom configurations. Now Rails, it comes with certain rules. When you start coding in for a Rails application, you must and should use the rules which are defined by the Rails framework. You should not try to write your own things. It will make your code bad and very much, it will not be more flexible. If you use the rules which are defined by Rails, it will become easy for the development also. So there are two principles of Rails. One is don't repeat yourself and another one is convention over configuration. In the second, you must always use the rules which are defined by the Rails framework and not use your own rules. Okay, so these are the two principles of Rails. As I had told earlier, Rails is a full stack framework. Full stack framework as in it contains both the front end and the back end. So to achieve this, there are lots of technologies that are used inside of Rails application. When you start working on Ruby on Rails, you not just have to know Ruby, you have to know various other technologies as well. Okay, so Rails uses various technologies for its full functionality. For the front end, it makes use of HTML, CSS, JavaScript and CoffeeScript. HTML, CSS, JavaScript, I'm assuming you guys must have gone through certain sessions. CoffeeScript is something new. CoffeeScript is used especially in Rails. It is used outside also, but in Rails especially CoffeeScript is used. So this is front end. Back end is a Ruby language. And we have the databases. Various database you can connect to a Rails application like SQLite, MySQL, Post, etc. So these are the various technology stack. While working on Rails, you get to know various other technologies also. Okay. So next, I had told earlier that Rails follow MVC architecture. What is MVC? MVC is model controller. Okay, so model view controller is a software design pattern for developing web applications. Okay, so there are three layers in this. First one is the model. This level is responsible for maintaining data. At the model level, what we do is we generally store the data. It connects directly to the database of the application, whichever database you are using. A model directly interacts with the database. Okay, so model is responsible for maintaining data. View is responsible for displaying data to the user. View is nothing but the front end part of our application. Okay, it is responsible for displaying data to the user. Next is controller. A controller handles users' requests and renders appropriate view with model data. A controller is nothing but it is present in between your model and view. A controller, it acts as an interface between a model and view. So whenever user requests some data, what it does, it loads the view with whatever is the appropriate model data. So controller always acts as a mediator between model and view. So Rails is completely built on the MVC architecture. Next, we'll see a very simple diagram to understand this better. What do we see here? We'll start with the browser. Okay, browser is our client side. Whenever a user starts using your application, it will start with the browser. Okay, at the view, whatever you see in the browser, whatever appears in the browser comes directly through view. So a view is connected to the browser. In the browser, a user does some action. Suppose it clicks a button. Okay, we are assuming a click action has been triggered in the browser. So from the browser, the first redirection that will happen, it will go to the controller. Now this controller will handle the user request. Whatever user has requested, a controller will handle. It will make a decision of what should be done. So after manipulation, it will go to the model. Model is directly connected to the database. So whatever data manipulation has to happen will happen at the model level only. Okay, so whatever happens in the model comes back to the controller. There is a two-way arrow. Okay, so once the data comes back to the controller gives it to the view. After manipulation of data, whatever the user request, okay, if certain data is manipulated, that manipulated data comes first to the controller. From controller, it will go to the view, and view will again display data to the browser. So this is a very high level explanation of what happens inside a MVC architecture. So just understand this here. Always browser is our client side where the user start doing certain actions. From here, whatever action the user does, it will first go to the controller. A controller will then communicate with the model. Model is responsible for manipulating the data. It is connected to the database. From this, whatever updated data or changed data, that will come back to the controller. Now this controller will give that updated data to the view. View is the presentation layer. It is completely responsible for displaying the data to the user. So once the data comes to the view will show it to the browser. So this is how an MVC architecture works. Okay. So in Rails, as we have seen that there are various technology stacks, we'll see which one uses what. The view part of the MVC architecture is the front end part. This uses the HTML, CSS, JavaScript or CoffeeScript. So view is the presentation layer which handles the displaying of data. Displaying of data is done using HTML, CSS, JavaScript or CoffeeScript. So view is that part. Controller and model, both of them are written in Ruby language. Inside of Rails application, controller and model, both of them are in Ruby language only. And the database that we connect can be of any type, generally SQL, but there are different SQL clients like the MySQL, SQLite, PostgreSQL, etc. So database is SQL, controller and model is written in Ruby language, view is written in HTML, CSS, JavaScript. Okay. So this is the MVC architecture. Next, once you create a Rails application, you see that a lot of default files are being created. Default files as in it will create a complete directory structure. It contains all the required files. Now, we have seen a command to create a Rails folder, a Rails project called Rails new space whatever project name you want to give. In our example, we have used the name as sample underscore app. Okay. So once you run that command, you see that a list of folders get created. So the folders that are being created are app, bin, config, db, lib, log, public, test. Okay, we'll see what is the purpose of each folder. %90 of your application code goes here. Your model, views, controllers, mailers, or any extra folder that you create will always be inside the app. App is the major folder in your Rails application. Inside this, we write all the Ruby code. Next is config. Config contains, as the name suggests, it's the configuration file. Like the database connection, whatever you want to make, or application level behavior, all this configuration files go inside the config folder. Next is DB. DB contains the database related files. Next is lib. Lib is short form of library. So whatever you install some, not install, if you write certain libraries, they all will be stored in the lib folder. Log. All the logs files specific to all the environments are stored here. Logs are nothing but when you run an application, in the background certain files will be created. Okay, this contains all the activity that you do. Now suppose a user clicks on a button. What happens in the background? All that is stored in the log. There are environments. Now what are environments? Environments are nothing but there are three environments. I'll tell you first that. So the environments are development environment, testing environment, and production environment. Development environment is what you do while you're developing the code. Now you're developing a code. You want to see the output. Okay, so that is nothing but the development environment. In the development environment, you will develop the code. Testing environment is when you are giving some code to the testers to test your application. Then you change the environment to testing environment. Next will be the production environment. When you are deploying your application, when you want to give it to the end user to use your application, you will give it in the production environment. So there are three environments: development, testing, and production. So every environment has its specific log files. Whatever activity that happens inside of your application will be stored in the log files. Folder. Public folder is whatever you write, whatever file you create inside of a public folder will directly be visible to the user. Now suppose you created an application and you have deployed it on the server. Say your app name is app name only. So whatever file you write inside the public folder will directly be accessible through this link, appname.com/file name, whatever file name you give and whatever use your app name. A public directly is something which are very common files and which are directly visible to the user. Automated testing, or you want to do unit testing, whatever are the files that you create will directly go inside the test folder. Next is temp. Temp is one folder which contains all the cached data for your application. Vendor, all the third party JavaScript or CSS library are stored here. Vendor as in whatever, if you install some third party applications or some the code which you have not written but made use of from some third party application, all such files will inside the vendor folder. We'll see. These folders. Now we'll see one of the most important topic, that is the gems. So what are gems? Gems are nothing but libraries or packages written in Ruby language that can be used inside of your project. Gems are nothing but libraries. We have seen earlier that Rails works on the principle of don't repeat yourself. This also means that if there is any functionality that is available as a library or a package, you need not write that. You don't have to struggle to write the same logic again. Instead, you can just include that particular library in your application. So gems is one of the part of the don't repeat yourself principle. So gems are nothing but libraries or packages which are written of course in Ruby language, and these are used inside your project. So all the gems in your project can be viewed inside a text file called a gem file. A gem file is a normal text file which contains the list of all the gems that are installed inside of your application. Now if you want to install a gem, you will simply use the command gem install gem and gem name. Okay, suppose your a gem name is device. What do? We simply give gem install device. Okay, so to install a gem, we use a very simple command. Now, all the gems that are installed your applications directly come through there is a very standard website that's called rubygems.org. So through this website only all the gems are downloaded in your application. Okay. A gem file is a file where we store all the information of the gems that are installed in your application. Rails is also one gem. Okay. Now, what is bundler? Bundler is a gem dependency manager. It ensures that when a gem is installed, all the related dependency gems are installed along with it. Now you install the gems gem A. The gem A has dependency gem B and C. Okay, so whenever you install a gem using bundler, bundler is a package manager, a gem dependency manager. All the dependent gems also get installed. So to install bundler, what do? Again the same command, gem install bundler. Once the bundler is installed, you can start installing gems in your project using the bundle. Okay. So to install a gem in your project, add the gem in your gem file and run bundle install. Bundle install is the command. So what is a bundler? It's a gem dependency manager. That is, if a certain gem depends on another gem, okay, there is a dependency linked between various gems. So if you install gem A, all the dependent gems also get installed along with it. Okay, with the help of bundler. So what do? Suppose you want to install gem A. The gem A you write in your file gem file and you simply run the command bundle install. This will install the gem and its dependencies. Okay. We'll take a break here. Much important that you learn some commands and as well important that you know the basics of Linux. Okay. So Linux commands help you a lot whenever you're working on a Rails application. Like simple commands like how to create a directory, make directory, copying files to the server. Such simple commands help. So before learning Rails, I recommend that you also go through the commands, basic commands of Linux applications. Now come to Rails commands. Now as Rails you must have observed is vastly used through the command prompt. So there are certain commands that we use inside of our Rails application. The first one is Rails console. Rails console will tell you what means you can access your application using command line. It is similar to your IRB. Okay, how I generally execute Ruby commands using the IRB. Similarly, inside of Rails application, we use the command as Rails console. So Rails console is the command which is similar to IRB, and you can start writing Ruby commands directly inside that. Next is Rails server. Rails server will launch a web server. By default, runs on the port 3000. Now, As I had told earlier, Rails is a completely web application development. Okay. Um, so to view your project or to run your project, you need a server, a web server. So to launch a web server, Rails server is the command that is used. Okay. So as you must be knowing that every HTTP server comes with a certain port. A port is something on which the application runs. So Rails server by default starts on the port number 3000. Okay. So whenever you run the command Rails server, it launches a HTTP web server and it runs default on the port number 3000. Next command. Next command is Rails generate. Rails generate means it is used to generate files like controller, model, etc. Okay. So Rails generate. Suppose you want to generate a model. What do we give? Rails generate model, model name. So like this, this is one Rails generate command. Next is Rails DB. It opens up the database. Now in our applications, we have connected a database, say SQLite, and you want to do certain SQL operations like select star from table name or delete from table name, whatever operation you want to do database related, all that will be done through Rails DB. Rails DB will open up the database application. Rails destroy. Rails destroy is opposite of Rails generate. Rails generate will generate the files. Rails destroy will destroy the files. So destroys the files which are created using the generate command. Okay, so these are all there are very limited commands in Rails, but it's good if you know all of them. And generally when you start coding on Rails application, you will need all of them very regularly. So it's good if you remember them. Mostly we use Rails console. Okay. Next, rake. Rake command. Rake is nothing but I don't know if you people are familiar with C++, but in C++ there's something called makefile. Okay. Okay. So rake command. Rake is a task manager that executes inbuilt and user-defined tasks of Rails. So there are certain tasks, a predefined tasks. Okay. You want to run a set of tasks together. What do we do? We create a rake command. So rake is a task manager that executes inbuilt and user-defined tasks of Rails. Okay. Now rake is nothing but again a gem and is installed along with Rails. Now when you install Rails, by default rake also gets installed. All the tasks that rake can run are found using the command rake-t. Okay. Now there are tasks what all rake can do. You can find out using the command rake-t. Now example of rake command is rake. This is one sample command. We'll see one example of this. First, we'll check if Rails is installed. To check the version of the Rails, which command do we use? Rails-v. So Rails is currently at version 4.0.0, but the latest version is Rails 5. Okay, in the system it's Rails 4. Version wise, syntaxes and all change a little, so it's good if you start working on the latest version of Rails. Now we'll create a very basic Rails application. What command we use? Rails new sample app. You are seeing that a series of files are being created. As I had told, whenever you create a Rails application, by default files get created. Okay. So you can see a big list of files is being created. What did we do? We did a very simple Rails new sample underscore app. This is the command to create a sample app. So we can, once you run that, by default files will be created. Okay. Readme rake file, gem file, app folder, bin folder, config folder. So there are a list of files that gets created once you run the Rails new application. Log files, public, test, temp, vendor, and it's still running actually. I told about this bundle install where the gems get installed using this. Okay. Now our directory is created. Okay. Can you see here Ruby gems, resolving dependencies, fetching dependency metadata from HTML. So rubygems.org is the place from where all the gems get installed. So in our application, this is the list of gems that gets installed by default. You don't have to write anything, you don't have to do anything. Just run one command and all the dependent files, all the required directories, everything gets ready for you. You just have to start coding inside that. That's the only requirement. Okay. Now we have created a basic Rails application. Now we'll see what is present. So for that, first we should go inside the directory. So to go inside the directory, what's the command that we use? We use cd. Cd as in change directory. So change directory to sample underscore app, where we are storing all the our directory files. Okay. Now we are inside the sample app. I have changed the directory to sample app. Just okay. Now here inside this directory you can check what all you can do. First we'll check what are all the various commands that you can run. For that we have a very simple, okay, there's some dependency problem. Fine. File holds the purpose. Okay. Now I'm going inside the app folder. Inside app folder you can see that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 folders being created. First one is assets. Assets are nothing but your JavaScript style sheets and images. Okay. Remember this. Assets are nothing but your images, JavaScripts and style sheets. Similarly, there will be a folder for controller. By default, there will be one folder, one application controller. Application control is like your main controller of your function. Next, helpers. Helpers is another our helper files. We'll see when we start coding. Mailers, models. Okay, models is the folder where all our model files come. Similarly, views. Inside views, we'll have one default file called application.html.erb. This is like your main HTML file. Okay. Similarly, there is a config folder. Config folder contains all the configuration files. Okay, we have seen here environment.rb. I had explained about environment where there are three types of environments: production, testing, and development. So all the configuration related files will be present in the config folder. Next, DB. DB contains all the database related files. Library. Library contains whatever tasks that you write. Okay. Here we have a folder called tasks. This contains all the task files. Log. I have told about log. All the activity that happens inside of your application will be stored inside the log folder. Next is public. Public is nothing but whatever you write here will be directly visible to the user. Next is test. Testing. Integration testing or unit testing, whatever testing that you are doing, all the files will be placed here. So when you are working on Rails application, you must know what each file does, what is the purpose of each folder, what is the purpose of each file that you write. Only then it will become easier for you to write. Temp. Temp stores all the cached data. Okay, whatever you are caching in your application will be stored in the temp folder. Vendor. Vendor holds all the third party applications. For example, JavaScript is the third party application. So JavaScript related files or JavaScript library will be stored inside the vendor folder. Git ignore config.ru gem file. Gem file is the file which I have spoken about. Gem file contains all the list of the gems that are present in your application. Open this and see. Now this is a sample gem file. This is the default gem file that comes up with your application. Okay, here we have mentioned the source as https rubygems.org. So from this site is where our gems get installed. Now what are all the gems that we are using in our application? All the list will be given here. Now for example, these are all the default gems. Whenever you create a new application, these are the gems that by default gets added in your application. Like the gem Rails. Rails is also one gem. Beside that a number is written. That number is the version of the gem. Okay. So here gem Rails version is 4.0. SQLite 3 is the database. Okay. Similarly, we have SAS. SAS is for style sheets, Uglifier, Coffee Rails, and all the other gems that you see here are the required gems which are needed at the very basic level to run your application. If you want to add more gems, what we do? We write a gem here. Suppose I want to install gem. Install, say bundler. Or not bundler, we'll take device. So gem install device. Once you add a whatever gem you required, you add it in this file and you run the command as bundle install. This will install the gem for you. Okay. This is the rake file where we had seen that certain tasks are executed using rake command. Okay. So what we'll do is once you understand the directory structure, I know there are lots of files and all, but we'll see tomorrow a practical application where Rails can be used to create a website so that we can write some coding and it will be more interesting. Okay. Using Rails so that it will be more interesting. Okay. Thank you everyone.